Hi, this is Kelly Riddle. Welcome to Texas Rules and Procedures. If you're a private investigator in the state of Texas or looking to become a private investigator in the state of Texas, these are the things that you need to understand. Rules and regulations, you're required to have this course to renew your license, to have continuing education. I am the author of these 12 books. Feel free to check them out. If I can help you, feel free to buy them and help you learn even further. This is just recently updated 2019-2020 Texas Private Security Statutes and Rules. So understand, this is very much like if you've ever been in real estate where you have a broker and then you have sales agents underneath them. Well, it's the same type of mentality. You got to have an agency who can then have investigators working for that agency. An investigation company must meet these qualifications detailed in this section. So you got to have 3 years, consecutive years of investigation-related experience, a bachelor's degree in criminal justice or related course of study, a bachelor's degree with 12 months of investigative-related experience, an associate's degree in criminal justice or related course of study with 24 months of investigative experience, a specialized course of study directed for and related to the private investigation profession taught and presented through a 4-year accredited university. So that is to be the manager of the agency. You have to qualify, and that's how you qualify. And then you have to sit for a test. After you pass the test, then you get your agency license. You got to show proof of insurance, liability insurance. Once all that's set up, you become the manager or the representative now of that agency. Confidentiality of records. The records are maintained by the Private Security Bureau are confidential and not subject to mandatory disclosure under this code. Licensing duties and duties of investigation companies. The person holds a license as an investigation company. A person may not act as an investigation company, offer to perform the services of an investigation company, or engage in business activities of which a license is required under this chapter. Unless you have a license, of course. Classification and limitation of a company. The licenses are: a Class A is an investigation company. A Class B is a security company. A Class C is both. You can do investigations and security. And then you have other alarm and level 3 training and that type of stuff. So my recommendation is get a Class C. It costs a little bit more, but like I did, I started off as an investigation company. And after, I'm in business 31 years now. Well, early on, I figured out that I was going to do security consulting, and I did alarm monitoring, I did CCTV cameras, a lot of different things that required security, a Class C or Class B. So if you get a Class C up front, it costs a little more, but you can do everything, including executive protection. Rules restricting advertising. So the commission may not adopt rules that restrict advertising or bidding by a licensed agency. You can't bid on anything in the state of Texas if you're not already licensed. The commission may not include rules to prohibit false, misleading, or deceptive practice by a person regulated under this chapter. It restricts the person's use of it cannot restrict the person's use of the type of advertising, radio, TV, billboards, whatever. So this basically says that they cannot restrict you from advertising. You have to be licensed to advertise in the state of Texas, and you have to be licensed to even bid on a contract. Investigation company is a person acts as an investigations company for the purposes of this chapter if they engage in the business of obtaining or furnishing or accepts employment to obtain or furnish information related to crimes or wrongs done or threatened against a person, state, or the United States, or the identity, habits, business, occupation, knowledge, efficiency, loyalty, movement, location, affiliations, associations, transactions, acts, reputations, or character of a person. That basically sums it up. If you're going to investigate anybody or any company, you got to be licensed. For this, obtaining or furnishing information includes information obtained or furnished through the review and analysis of and the investigation into the content of computer-based data. So a forensic computer company has to be licensed. General qualifications. So An applicant for a company license must be at least 18 years old and must not, at the time of application, be charged under an information or indictment of a Class A or B misdemeanor or felony offenses determined by the disqualifying rule. It goes on and on and on to talk about offenses and stuff, but essentially you can't have a Class A or Class B misdemeanor or felony, and you got to be mentally competent. Additional qualifications. So, to an applicant for a company license to engage in the business of an investigations company must have, before the date of the application, 3 consecutive years experience in the field of investigations as an employee or owner of an investigation company, or satisfy the requirements set by the commission. Application's experience must be reviewed by the department and determined to be adequate. Reciprocal company license or certain applications. So the department may waive any prerequisite to obtaining a company license for an applicant who holds a company license issued by another jurisdiction with which the state has a reciprocity agreement. I think they put this in there for future reference because Texas does not have reciprocity with any other states at this moment in time, but they may be thinking about it. Provisional company license. The department may issue a provisional company license to an applicant currently licensed in another jurisdiction who seeks an equivalent company license in this state, who has been licensed and is in good standing in another state, has passed a national or other examination recognized by the commission, is sponsored by a person licensed by the department in this state. A provisional company license is valid until the date the department approves or denies the provisional license. So it gives them the opportunity to get a temporary license, in essence. The license for provisional must pass the examination, must be verified under the department, and satisfy all the licensing requirements. Temporary continuation of a company license. If something happens to an individual, the manager quits for some reason. I don't know how you quit your own company, but if you have a partner and one of them quits and he happens to be the manager, or if the person terminates, is deceased, this gives you the ability to continue on for a temporary period of time. Insurance requirement. You have to have liability insurance to operate in the state of Texas. The insurance policy must contain the minimum limits of $100,000 for each occurrence, or $50,000 for each occurrence for personal injury. Got to show proof before they'll issue the license. Company license holder employees records. A company license holder may be legally responsible for the conduct of the company license holder's business of each employee. So basically, anybody under your license, anyone licensed by your agency, you're responsible for. Branch offices. If you advertise in different cities, you better also have a branch office there. So if you set up a branch, you have to notify the department and advise them of the addresses, etc. Advertising. An advertisement by a company license holder soliciting or advertising business must contain the company license holder's company name and address as stated in the department records, and your license number. Reports to employers or clients. A written report submitted to a company license holder's employer or client may only be submitted by the company license holder, the manager, or if I designate somebody, that can happen. But your licensed investigators can't just go out and start handing out reports. It has to come from the owner or a designated person. Confidentiality. Information related to criminal offenses is considered confidential. A company license holder, partner, etc., may not disclose to any other party information obtained by the person for an employer or client, except at the direction of the employer or as required by state law. Personal protection officer, that's executive protection. They have their own separate license, so that's why you need a C license, because that comes under security, and so you have to be, technically, you have to be a security guard and then take the courses to be a personal protection officer. Limited authority to carry firearms. An individual acting as a personal protection officer, a private investigator, is not authorized to carry a weapon. If you have a concealed permit, you can carry it because you're a private citizen, but you can't use it and as a private investigator. So only a personal protection officer may carry a firearm when they're engaged in exclusive performance of the officer's duties and traveling to and from the officer's place of assignment. Very strict on what that means. If you're doing executive protection, you can only carry it while you're doing executive protection. Licensing, individual license, they must be employed by a company license holder. So any individual, any PI out there has to fall under an agency. If they're not the agency owner, they go to work for an agency. Now, a person can be licensed by multiple agencies. If they're say licensed by company A and company B, if they go to work for company C, they have to do what's called an employee update. And so they go on to the DPS website and fill out an employee update. And right now it's $17. And all it is basically notifying the licensing bureau that you're employed and doing work for multiple companies. But if you do not do that, and you're not working for any of the other companies, you're operating without authority. Pocket cards, your ID card, you must have it on you anytime you're working. It must be able to have your photograph affixed to the card. They issue them now with a photograph on them. Exemption for undercover agent. It just makes perfect sense that if you have an undercover operation going on, the person should not be licensed. Because what happens if someone starts suspecting that he's an investigator and they check the state board site and they find that he's licensed as an investigator? That could be a lot of problems. So, but they have to be under the direction of a supervised agency. License renewal. You have to renew your license and may do so before it's expired. A person whose license has been expired for 1 year or more may not renew the license. You have to start all over. You have to pay more if it expired past 90 days, etc., etc. It costs you more, but after 1 year, you got to start all over. Law enforcement personnel, this chapter does not apply to a person who has full-time employment as a peace officer and who receives compensation for private employment on an individual or an independent contractor basis. Goes on and spells out what that means, a reserve officer, blah, blah, blah. So, a licensed, active law enforcement personnel does not apply to them. Penalties enforcement. A person who is not licensed under this chapter, who does not have a license application pending, and who violates this chapter may be assessed a civil penalty paid to the state not to exceed $10,000 each violation. A person who contracts with a person knowing that they are not licensed is also subject to the same penalty. Deceptive trade practices, a person who performs or offers to perform an activity regulated under this chapter but who is not licensed can also be charged with deceptive trade practice. Failure to surrender certain documents. Once you no longer work for a company, you're supposed to turn your credentials into that company. If that agency or DPS demands that you do so and you don't, you can be in violation. Employment requirements. A person may not contract directly with a client to perform a regulated service. So the employment relationship exists between the licensed agency and the client. An individual PI can't go out and start getting clients. It has to come under the agency. Standards of conduct. The state seal of Texas may not be displayed on any uniform, identification card, badge, anything like that. And so it's very strict about what you can and can't do. Contract and notification requirements. A company license holder shall inform the client of their right to have a written contract describing the fees to be charged and the services to be rendered. So if requested, a written contract for regulated services shall be furnished to a client within 7 days, and a written report as well. So you should offer one to a client always. They can turn it down, but you need to document that. A lot of times what I'll do is email them the contract and then get them to just say, per our verbal agreement. In the state of Texas and in most states, a verbal commitment is a binding contract. So it depends on how you document that. A licensee's advertisement must include the company's name and address as it appears on the records and the company license. Consumer information. You must have your PI license hanging up in your office or in your house, whatever bedroom or whatever you use as your office. It must have the information on it about the regulatory services, and if licenses must display conspicuously in the principal place of business. And on your contracts, it has to state on there, if disgruntled or whatever, you have the right to contact the regulatory division and have their phone number and address on there. Now you have to provide a drug-free workplace policy. So if you're a one-person operation, you own the agency and you're the only investigator, you still have to have an employment file on yourself. You have to run a background check on anybody that you're going to hire. Even though the state's going to run a background, you have to run that criminal history, have it in the file showing that you did so, did your due diligence basically, and you have to have a drug-free workplace policy and an EEOC policy in the file. And so I have the employees sign off on it. Individual license applications, it's the responsibility of the license company to ensure that the applicants, the people that are going to work under you, are properly licensed. Employee termination. When a termination occurs, the agency shall notify the department of such conduct within 14 days of the termination. Now you can do that online. Expiration. All company license, the agency license, are valid for 1 year. An individual license is good for 2 years. Company representative. They used to call it a manager. Now they call it a representative. And the company representative is the individual to whom the department may direct all correspondences to and must successfully meet the examination. So it's basically a manager. They now are calling it a company representative. Goes on to talk about percentages. So you can have a stockholder who can be a representative, and so it gets into all the corporate side of things. Company records. So a licensee and security department must keep employee records for at least 2 years from the date of their employment, and must document a pre-employment check, and you must have all their training certifications and continuing education training. You have to have a copy of all that. Business records. You have to keep them for at least 2 years from the last date of the related service that was provided. So basically keep your records. Continuing education requirements. Owners, partners, and shareholders who shall complete a total of 8 hours of continuing education, including 7 hours in the subject matter that relates to the type of regulated service provided by their company, and 1 hour of ethics. So essentially, let me go to the next slide, it's easier. Private investigators with more than 15 years of experience as continued license as API shall complete a total of 12 hours of continuing education. 8 hours must relate to investigations, 2 hours of which must cover ethics, and 2 must involve the review of this act that we're going over right now, the Licensing Act. Private investigators with less than 15 years must have a total of 18 hours, 2 hours of continuing education related to this act, and 2 related to ethics. So understand that in the state of Texas, you have to have an agency, and then you have employees underneath that agency. You need to make sure that everyone is properly licensed and ensure that you follow these regulations. These were recently changed. Some of the wording has changed, like manager and representatives and things of that nature, but it's essentially the same. So that's 1702. There's chapter 35, which is another code that goes hand in hand with this. It talks more about the operation of the business, and so you need to check that out as well. But 1702 is the occupation code that regulates our business. I hope this covers everything that you needed. If you have any questions, please give me a call. Thank you again.